Back here now, joining me on the Peerless Boilers hotline. Peerless builds America's best boilers from New York Baseball Digest, and that's Mike Silva. Mike, Zach Gelb here, DARPATV.com. Thank you for joining me, and how you doing on this fine evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I really am looking forward to it.
Well, thank you for coming on, and the new playoff system right now in the MLB, according to Ken Rosenthal, that will be the new system for this year. Thoughts on that system? Do you like it?
Yeah, I do. I think, especially in a sport that doesn't have a salary cap, you need to find a way to keep those mid-market teams interested. And look, anybody could complain and say, well, the owners need to invest in their team, they need to make money. The truth of the matter is that local revenues determine a lot of what teams can do. The Florida Marlins just got a new ballpark. You see them spending some money. If they don't draw, if they don't play well, that payroll becomes a problem, and you see them sell players off. So I think the way to combat that is with this system. You have 10 teams now making the playoffs in the sport. It evens the playing field a little bit, because then you could get into a short series against the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Phillies, or teams that right now are at the top of the heap in terms of economics, and you can beat them. Anyone can win in a short series. So I'm all for it, and I think it's necessary because of the economic situation in the game. The
one thing I really love about it is now it puts an importance on the division winners, because now those two wildcard teams have to play a one-game playoff. That's why I love it.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and you saw that a little bit with the Yankees and the Rays, and there was some dialogue early in spring training this year where Joe Girardi and Brian Cashman had a dispute about how hard the Yankees were trying. It needs to be where a wild card team has a little bit of a tougher road. If you don't give an incentive for the division, what's the point? I mean, let's face it, a team like the Yankees that have won so many divisions over the years, it's almost comical when they celebrate or get T-shirts, because it doesn't mean all that much. But I do agree. I agree with you. You need to have that one-game playoff, and I think it's good kind of drama. You have that second wild card. You guys have a play-in game. It adds a little spice. We saw how that last game of the regular season, those four teams, and how everybody was engaged in that whole process. And, you also saw how well people have responded to one-game playoffs, even here in New York with the Mets and the Reds back in 1999. So I'm all for it.
Talking about those Mets, we finally heard the owner, Jeff Wilpon, speak at spring training. I laughed through the majority of the stuff he said, being the Mets fan I am, knowing their situation. But the one thing that it just shocks me, and maybe you could explain this to me, how can SNY buy stocks in the Mets? Because I just don't get that whatsoever.
Well, I mean, it's 65% owned by the Wilpons. Comcast owns a piece, so I guess when you talk about moving money around, the 35% could put money in there. Long and short of it, if you really want to delve into the Wilpon and Sterling Equities and SNY financing, you might need more than the segment that we have. Really what it looks like, and no one will truly know because the Mets are a private business. MLB is antitrust exempt, so you're never going to get a straight answer from them. They're just playing a shell game. They're moving money around. They're trying to survive. The best way that I could describe it is if you're a little short on cash, you're having some financial troubles at home, you use your credit card to pay a few things that you probably should use cash, and then you use your Visa to pay your MasterCard, and you hold off and you hold off until you can get that payday. And for the Mets, the payday is people showing up to the ballpark. Quite honestly, and I don't think the Mets are as bad as everybody makes them out to be, but quite honestly, I don't think they're a very easy sell. I think they'd have to contend well into August for fans to show up at the rate that the Wilpons need. There was a report, and I can't remember which publication right now, that when they opened up Citi Field, they needed about 3.2 million fans to meet their debt obligations. Last year, they were significantly below that. I think they were about 1 million below that at 2.2. If you use 1.7 million in attendance as the over-under, I would take the under. I would look at them about 1.5. And if they get off to a really bad start and don't play well, it could get worse than that.
The way I look at it, because I'm in the same boat as you, I think the Mets are going to be bad this year, but I don't think they're going to be horrible, like 30 wins, like I've seen some people write on Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff. They'll probably be like a 75-win team. If everything goes right, maybe go into the low 80s. But the small market thing, it hasn't even been a year yet, and the fans are furious with it. How long do you think this small market team and the style can last with this fan base?
I think it definitely is not sitting well because they couldn't even go out and make some secondary moves to ensure that they would be in a better position to win in the low 80s. I think if you had signed a couple of veteran arms, and I'm just throwing some names out there, I don't know how feasible if they wanted to play in New York, but a Bartolo Colon, maybe a John Garland coming off a shoulder surgery, or Jeff Francis, to incentive-laden contracts, just like they did with Chris Capuano and Chris Young. You might have the depth that you need. I mean, right now, asking you the 5 starters, the number 5, if you want to use Santana as that guy, it's very iffy after that. Sure, you got Matt Harvey, you got the young kids, but taking those kids away because you don't know when and if they're going to be ready this year, you got some career minor leaguers, some guys who haven't had success at the big league level that may be asked to make some significant starts and put some significant innings. That's where this gets scary. That's where you say, okay, the $100 million payroll is the problem. The real problem with $100 million is that you have more than 50% tied up in 3 players: David Wright, Johan Santana, Jason Bay, one of which we don't know is going to be on the field. The other, we don't know how productive he's going to be. And then David Wright, I think, is the most given of the 3. And look, he was injured last year, and he's had a couple of odd seasons the 2 years before that. So I think that's the issue with the $100 million payroll. I think if they didn't have those bad contracts and they were able to spend some money effectively and bring in some free agents, and specifically Santana and Bay are the issue there, I don't think you would see as many complaints. Where it would become an issue is if they couldn't get into a competition, and let's say, if a Jose Reyes type free agent that was a great fit for the Marlins, if they couldn't compete for the services of that type of player, that's when I think the fans will complain. I think if they had re-signed Reyes, though, and I don't really necessarily disagree with the decision because I think he's injury prone, and I do think the years were an issue. I think if they re-signed Reyes and kept the payroll around the same level, maybe slightly above, I don't know if there'd be as much outcry, to be perfectly honest. But look, Sandy Alderson said on the conference call, I was there on that conference call, that the payroll is going to be $100 million with or without Jose Reyes, and it's at 91 right now, give or take. So very clearly, they're living month to month, and it's based on income and revenue. And there's a big drop now to sell tickets, so obviously they're not meeting their goals, and that has had an adverse effect on the payroll.
We're talking to Mike Silva, New York Baseball Digest. Mike does a great job for that site. He also has a talk show coming up this evening at 8 p.m. right after he's done with our spot. But, Mike, the way I look at it, when you think New York Mets baseball for the last 10 years, you think of, besides Mike Piazza, I'm talking about more the recent years, you think of David Wright and Jose Reyes. Jose now is going to play in Miami, and David Wright is in the final year of his contract. After seeing what Ryan Zimmerman got, I guess it's not a confident sign for us Mets fans when you're looking at David Wright's contract status.
It's so hard to project this team. They're really month to month, and in a situation like David Wright, he's got a $15-16 million payment coming up. So if that's the yearly outlay that they need to put into the team, and if $100 million is a reasonable payroll to expect in the near future, that's 16% of their payroll. You have 2 things you have to consider. A, do they have the ability to pay one player that kind of money? And if they are going to play one player that kind of money, is it going to be David Wright? Is it going to be the David Wright that we saw from 2005 to 2008? Is it going to be a hybrid version of 2009 and 2010, where one year he was an average hitter that hit over 300 and didn't hit with power? Or is it the other year where he was a slugger who hit for power but struck out 170 times? Or worse yet, are you going to get a player that's injured like last year, that shows flashes of being the player that he used to be but can't stay on the field? Right now, this year will determine, I think, in their eyes, who David Wright is. And I think David Wright is a good player to be a supporting star. I don't think he's going to be in the mold of an Albert Pujols. I think he's proven he can't be that. I think David Wright is at his best when he's part of a cog, like he was when they had Beltran and Delgado, and Reyes was at his best in 06. So if you're going to invest in him, I think 2 things they're going to have to do. I think they're going to have to try to convince him that 5 years is in his best interest, and possibly, and I don't know if the Mets have been known to do this, maybe backload some of the money so that during the first few years of that contract, when they still have Bay and Santana on the payroll, he makes a little bit less. The big question I have is that David Wright, he says he wants to stay here, but does he want to stay here? He recently has put his Manhattan penthouse up for sale for about $7 million. He admitted that he spent some time down in Virginia now, and that's where he's from. if a winning situation comes up, if the Phillies have some, and they have a need for a third baseman, if they clear some payroll by the time he's a free agent, would he consider going down the turnpike? Boston, I know Kevin Youkilis is probably a free agent around the same time. Would they be interested in bringing him in? A whole lot of questions. I think, obviously, it's a Mets question. Can they afford him? Do they want to give him the long-term contract? But also, does Wright want to stay here? And I think though both sides say yes, I'm not quite sure if they're being forthright right now. I think they're being politically correct, to be honest.
The way I look at also, too, with David Wright, I actually do think he's going to have a big season this year. I'm not saying 40 home runs. I think he'll eclipse the 30 number and drive in 100 RBIs if he does stay healthy. But I really think an underrated story with him is those walls, because I've been to Citi Field tons of times. I've seen the camera zoomed in on his face, and he'll hit a ball that he thinks should be out of the park, and it gets caught at the warning track, and he really throws his helmet down. So maybe we see a different David Wright this year because they may move the walls in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Look, the little out by the Mo zone where it got to like 415 out there in center field between right and center, it was absurd. The tall wall on the left was absurd. I think you admitted that he's had to change and maybe pull the ball a little more. Look, David Wright's at his best when he's going the other way, when he's just being himself, when he's looking to hit the ball hard, and then the ball finds a way to get over the fence. And if the new Citi Field allows David Wright to hit the ball hard and get rewarded in terms of home runs, great. I agree with you on that. I think it's certainly, you could do all the numbers, all the stats. It has a psychological impact on the team. If you come here for 3 games, people are talking about how big it is. Just imagine if you played 81 of your games here. And do yourself, I mean, I'm sure you've done this, but just go to both ballparks. Go to Yankee Stadium, go to Citi Field, and do
tremendous
day after
difference.
Day. And you walk in. You don't have to go down the field. Just walk in and be in like first row of stand. You notice it right away, and that's all you really need to know. And I definitely agree with you. There's a big difference there.
I go to about 20 Mets games a year at Citi Field, and I also went to one Yankee game last year. I sat in the bleacher creatures, and some of the balls that wouldn't even get past halfway through the third base line at Citi Field were going out at Yankee Stadium. So there's the difference right there. But the big thing coming out of Mets camp right now, Lucas Duda, everyone's so high on this kid. If I had to ask you right now, Mike, over under 25 home runs for Lucas Duda, what would you be taking?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a good number. If you want to make it a tough bet, that's a good number. I think you're right around 25 if he stays healthy. I think last year, if you combine both, he was around 20 to 21. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I'm going to say, you know what? I don't know if this was one of the options. I would say you're right around 25. I think it's 50-50. It could go either way, but I think you're right around the number there with that home run total.
We're talking to Mike Silva, and Mike, now let's go to the New York Yankees. We'll wrap up things right here with the Yankees coming from the Mets. Phil Hughes, I talked to Sweeney Murdy today of WFAN and SNY, and Sweeney said he would basically have to trip for Phil Hughes not to get a spot in this rotation this year. Do you expect number 65 to be in the rotation once camp breaks?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I had Eric Boland, beat writer for the Newsday, coming on tonight, and I was talking a little bit with him before I came on with you. And yeah, I mean, that's really the plan. That they really like Phil Hughes. They feel he has top of the rotation stuff. He's due to start making some money now that he's been in the league about 5 years. And let's face it, I mean, Freddie Garcia, as much as I like him, and I think it was a good pickup by Brian Cashman last year, he's a 6-inning 3-run guy. He's a guy that's going to grind through 6 innings. He's going to be there. He's going to give you, and that's a quality start by today's standards, by the numbers. But he's not going to be able to be a guy that shows flashes at the top of the rotation. Phil Hughes is, and I'm not saying that he will be that consistently. He's going to have his peaks and valleys. But Phil Hughes has a lot more upside. And then I think Garcia also provides you the ability where, I don't want to sound cruel, but you're not really going to worry about saving him long term. So if you want to use him to be a mop-up guy for 3 innings, or when a starter gets knocked out, bring him in. You're not going to worry about necessarily, is this good for his long-term career? Is this good for his arm? I think if you manage him in a way, and I'm sure Joe Girardi will do this, that, hey, if he needs to, when he warms up, if he needs to get in, they'll manage it that way. So, yeah, unless Phil Hughes shows that he has no fastball and completely falls apart like he did last spring, he'll be in. That's the word around Yankees camp. I expect it to be that way. Were
you shocked that Bobby V started talking smack to the New York Yankees?
No. I had a chance. I had the privilege of meeting Bobby at the Hampton Film Festival back in October, and I remember the scope of being that he really was was looking at the Red Sox job, and when he got it, I said right away, and Bobby is certainly a guy that is never short of opinion when you talk to him. I knew he would find a way to have some fun with the media. And let's face it, he's the perfect guy in a time where there's so much media. You and I are talking. You and I wouldn't be doing this 10, 11, 12 years ago. There wasn't the medium to do this. You need to fill columns. Mainstream needs to fill space. And if you have a manager that's going to talk and start going, Bobby's the perfect guy. And I think, and we're going to talk about this tonight, me and Eric Boland, Newsday beat reporter. I think this is more media-driven stuff. I don't think either team takes it seriously. Obviously, there's no love lost with Valentine. And I also think Joe Girardi, from what I understand, is a little perplexed why Bobby would say things like that. But I think Bobby likes to add spice to any kind of rivalry. He did that when the Mets and the Braves were going at it. And it's his way of maybe, I don't want to say motivating his team, but I just adding a little sense and heightened awareness around the whole situation. And let's face it, as much as Yankees Red Sox has great history, the rivalry hasn't been the same in the last 5-6 years. So I definitely think Bobby's going to add some spice to it, at least from the fan perspective. And sometimes that energy in the crowd and some of that competitiveness from Valentine, maybe it'll spruce up something that we haven't seen in quite some time.
Well, Silva, I'll tell you this as we're talking to Mike Silva. If you ever do a show that conflicts with mine, you thought Bobby V was bad, wait till you deal with me.
I want to get you on. I got to tell you, I'm impressed. I feel like I'm in, I get a lot of interviews, but this was a real pro job you did, so I appreciate you having me on, and I'd love to have you on. We could debate it a little bit,
That'd be great. Real quick, right before we let you go, you were great. The chat room's loving you. They're all saying Mike Silva's the man. They want to sleep with you or something tonight.
I don't know about that. I'm taking, but
real quick, right before we let you go, tell my viewers how they can watch your show coming up at 8.
Yeah, anytime you want to go, whether it's live or replay, go to NY Baseball Digest or nybaseballdigest.com. There's a link there to listen live. There's a link for the MP3. I'm in the iTunes store, and you can get me over there. And we're, obviously on Twitter at NYBD. nybaseballdigest.com is the website, and there's written content, audio, and hopefully one day video. But I got to get a lot better look and a lot more well-groomed before I put myself in that position. So. Anyway, that's the deal, nybaseballdigest.com.
Thanks so much, Mike. I'll make sure to check it out. Thanks for a few minutes.
All right. Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.